Welcome to Decision Analyst Insider Series webinar on choice modeling for optimization. My name is Christy Allen. I am the Marketing Director at Decision Analyst and the moderator today. Before I introduce our presenters, I have a few notes for everyone. In the handout section, there is a copy of today's presentation, along with some white papers. Also, please feel free to ask questions by typing in the chat box. We will attempt to answer as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. If we don't answer your question during the webinar, someone will respond to your question within a day or two. Today's presenters are Jerry Thomas, President and CEO of Decision Analyst. Jerry has 35 years of experience in conducting choice modeling research and advanced analytics. And Beth Horn, Vice President and Director of Marketing and Science, and she has experience in both consumer and business-to-business product categories. And with that, I am going to hand the presentation over to Jerry.
Good morning and welcome to our discussion of choice modeling. It will be Beth Horn and me doing the presentation this morning. Special welcome to our friends from Europe, where it's already afternoon, and to our friends from Canada and Mexico. And of course, a special welcome to our friends in the U.S. Choice modeling is used for an array of different types of marketing optimization. And we'll go through a lot of these examples as we go through the presentation. But we like to think of choice modeling as the application of the scientific method or scientific experiments to the solution of marketing problems or identification of marketing opportunities. The history of choice modeling, like the history of most things, is foggy at best. But the core idea has occupied human thinking for a very long time. Our species, has been trading or bartering goods and services for at least 1 million years and probably longer. So this idea of trading one thing for another is very deeply ingrained in our culture and in our thinking. And the core idea that I've got to give up something to get something else lies at the heart of choice modeling. Now, the formal mathematics of choice modeling have evolved mostly over the past 100 years or so. So that we're all using the same language with the same meaning. And we're going to run through a few definitions very quickly. But you're familiar with these terms. Some have a little bit different meaning as applied to choice modeling. So when we use the term choice modeling, we're really talking about a family of multivariate statistical techniques to help identify optimal combinations of marketing or input variables. And you're familiar with most of these terms, and Beth will go through them in just a few minutes and explain them. When we talk about variables, we're talking about the things that can be changed to influence the effectiveness of our marketing and advertising activities. We can change the price, we can change the package, we can change the advertising, positioning, messaging. We can change types of distribution. So there are many variables that marketing managers can affect. So that's what we're talking about, the kinds of things that marketing and brand managers can change to hopefully influence outcomes in the marketplace. Each variable has several levels or values. So when you hear the term levels, we're simply talking about different values of each variable. Scenario. A scenario is a unique set of marketing variables and levels, and we'll show an example of that in just a moment. Utilities. After the choice modeling experiments have been conducted, we can then assign weights to the variables and the variable levels, and these are called utilities. And the term optimization typically means to maximize the sales or maximize market share or maximize profits given certain variables, variable levels, and often constraints. Choice models can almost always be improved by calibration. And most commonly, we're calibrating choice models to market share. They can also be calibrated to things like brand awareness or distribution levels or other variables. But calibration is really important and should always be a part of choice modeling exercises. So what's the rationale for the use of choice modeling? Well, the human race, as we mentioned, has been making choices for a very, very long time. It's something we're quite good at. We can make choices quite easily and very quickly. And in fact, we have to make choices to survive. We make decisions every day about what to buy, what not to buy, what to wear, what not to wear. So we're good at making choices, and choice modeling takes advantage of this ability, this tendency of the human race to be pretty good at making choices. So in choice modeling, we're just simply asking people, given these options, what would your choice be? So it fits the way consumers think and behave. Now, choice modeling comes out of a school of thinking that would be described as rational. However, because people are simply making choices, choice modeling is also implicitly measuring or taking into account emotional factors. So it is incorporating both rational and emotional factors into the models. Let's bring all this together, a real quick illustration. Let's suppose that our goal was to optimize the design of a package. And let's suppose there were 4 different package sizes, 3 different types of packaging or formats, 5 different labels, 3 background colors, 4 prices, and 5 messages. Well, that doesn't seem like all that much to sort through, but it actually represents 3,600 unique possibilities or unique combinations. And the great power of choice modeling is that when it's all said and done, we can determine the appeal to consumers or the value of each one of those unique combinations. This is an illustration of what a scenario might look like in this example. So the respondent might see 4 different packages and labels, different sizes, different prices, and would be asked, if these were the choices you faced on the retail shelf or in the store where you normally shop, which one would you choose? And so they're asked which one they would prefer first, which one they would choose. And then the one that's their preference, we very likely would go ahead and say, well, okay, if that's your number 1 choice, would you actually buy it? So we follow that with an intent to buy question. And a respondent might see 6 to 8 of these scenarios during the course of the interview. And in each scenario, the packages would be different, the prices would be different, the sizes would be different, and the labels would be different, and so on. There are many different types of choice models, but some of the most commonly used choice models are shown on the screen. And I'm going to ask Beth to take us through these and explain some of the advantages and disadvantages.
All right, thank you, Jerry. So we're going to talk a little bit more about these 5 different types of choice models. However, remember that there are other types of choice models, and in fact, we can combine some of these together to really enhance our understanding of how consumers or customers make decisions in a category. It just depends on the situation. So our first choice model is called a max diff analysis. And in this method, respondents might see 12 to 16 sets of product features, and they select the most and least important to their purchase decision. So some advantages to this technique include it works well with a variety of items. By items, we mean flavors, messages, packages, images. It really runs the gamut. Another advantage is the technique produces a full relative ranking of all the attributes, and it's a simple and focused task. There are, of course, disadvantages to all techniques. This one is it can be a little repetitive. A consumer will see several sets. That could be a disadvantage. Competitive effects are typically not included when using this technique. It omits what we think are critical interactions or interplays among attributes such as brand and price, brand and features, and it definitely will not yield measures of cannibalization. So our next method is conjoint analysis, and in full profile conjoint, which is not used very much today, respondents would see one configured product at a time. The task is to rate preference for the one product or likelihood to buy. In pair comparison conjoint and contrast, respondents would see 2 products and they would rate their relative preference or divide points between the 2 products according to preference. So some advantages for full profile conjoint, simpler, more focused task. For pair comparison conjoint, you do receive more accurate relative preference as the 2 products are evaluated within context of one another. So there's a bit of that choice or trade-off baked into that technique. Disadvantages: omits competitive effects. Typically this paired comparison conjoint is used for a particular product, not a suite of products. Omits those important interactions we talked about earlier and does not measure cannibalization. So the next technique is called discrete choice modeling. This method more closely mimics the purchase context for many product categories, more so than the traditional conjoint model. So during the discrete choice exercise, respondents see several screens of products and make a selection on each screen. For some industries such as healthcare and pharmaceuticals, perhaps even insurance, the single choice technique doesn't adequately capture the decision-making process. So for these industries, it's usually a better practice to allow respondents to allocate points, say 100 or 10 points, across the options chosen or shown. A share model is then estimated to predict outcomes. So advantages of this particular technique: you do receive more accurate market share predictions. And that's because the competitive and the context of the purchase decision are baked into the technique. You do get those brand-specific price and feature interactions and effects, and you can evaluate product lines with this technique. Disadvantages include you do have to put more thought into the design. Don't just set your software to design mode and hit go. Really think about what the purchase context is, what are respondents, what are category users actually doing in the category, and try to replicate that in an online survey. Another disadvantage, of course, is the more complex the technique, budget increases accordingly. Our next technique is called a volumetric choice model. This is actually a technique that compiles or combines two or more models. So one model will predict the likelihood of selecting a product or a service, and the other model or models will predict the number of units of each product that would be purchased. So during the exercise, respondents would see several screens of products within the category, and they can choose to buy none, one, or more of each product. Some advantages of this technique, definitely more accurate unit share and units purchased predictions. You can include competitive and context, as we talked about earlier with discrete choice. You can deliver those brand-specific price, feature effects, that's good, and evaluate product lines, of course, with this technique. And the disadvantages are very similar to the discrete choice disadvantages, including difficulty in designing. Certainly in the analysis stage, you have to combine in many cases, more than two models together. Calibration can be a tricky thing to do here too, and definitely a larger budget is required. And our next technique is the menu-based choice model. This one is very interesting. It really mirrors a lot of our consumer choices today. So for this one, it's also a compilation of multiple models. So one model is going to predict likelihood of selecting a base product or a base service. And the other models will predict likelihood of purchase and or the number that they would be purchased of what we call add-on features. Some of our clients also refer to these features as bolt-on features. So during the exercise, respondents choose products and then they can add features to that base product. And you can think of some examples in your own consumer behavior. Some examples are adding a trim package to an automobile, an insurance rider for an insurance policy, or the ever popular adding a DVR to a video service package. So some advantages of this technique: you do get more accuracy, and this is because you are, with the menu-based choice model, really mirroring that context that the consumer, the customer, is engaged in when they make that purchase or subscription decision. It includes competitive context effects, brand-specific price and feature effects, and you can evaluate product lines, you can evaluate packages and bundles, and pricing as well. So menu-based choice modeling has all of this. And the disadvantages are very similar to the previous two techniques we talked about. Again, the more complex the model, the more moving parts, and the more likely you need to spend a great deal of time up front thinking about the purchase context. It is critical to get that right, and then the rest of the project will flow from there. Okay. And now I'm going to turn the presentation back over to Jerry.
Thank you, Beth. So we would like now to go through several case stories, and some of the details are fictional to protect the innocent or perhaps the guilty, as the case may be, but all are conceptually accurate. Rather than bore you with methods for each of the case studies, what I would like to do is just run through a set of best practices for all choice modeling studies, because this is the methods that were followed for most of these case stories that Beth will share with you. And projects typically begin with an alignment meeting. We get everyone who's has a stakeholder in this particular project, brand managers, it may be R&D, maybe the advertising agency, but we want all of the stakeholders at that alignment meeting to make sure that everyone is in agreement on the core objectives. Then we do a review of all relevant research that's been conducted previously in that product, for that product or that brand. Number 3, qualitative research is absolutely essential if you hope to get maximum value out of choice modeling, because qualitative research helps us pinpoint which variables to include. It helps us understand the language to use in the design of the questionnaire and the project. It helps us determine the number of levels and the prices or the values of the different levels. So I can't overemphasize enough how important qualitative research is in coming up with really great choice modeling results that are accurate and predictive. The next step is designing the experimental design that underlies the choice model, and typically those are designed in SAS or R language software. The survey itself, the choice modeling survey, is programmed using the Logician choice modeling platform. Sample sizes, number 6, typically range from 800 to 2,000, sometimes much larger samples, rarely less than 800. 6 to 8 scenarios per respondent is what is typically recommended. Once the experiments are conducted and the data is collected, we use a program called Choice Model R to analyze the results. And in fact, this is a program written by decision analyst programmers and advanced analytics staff. And you can actually download this program from the R language called the RCRAN library. It's free and you can use it as you wish. So just go to the RCRAN library. You can Google it to find it. And the last 2 steps are combined, and this is building the decision simulator and calibrating the data. And we always recommend calibrating the models. It will dramatically improve the accuracy of the results that come from the choice models. And the decision simulator is designed so that a client or an analyst can play what-if games. What if a competitor reduces their price 6 months from now? How do we respond? What if a competitor changes their package? How do we respond? So the decision simulator has immediate analytical value, but it also has value for a year or 2 following the choice modeling, because it does have competitive and variables built into the model. So I'd like to turn it over to Beth again to take us through several case stories.
Okay, thanks, Jerry. So this first case story was, quite frankly, a lot of fun. We call it the vending machine optimization. And when you think about vending machines, I believe we're all guilty of visiting vending machines, maybe even multiple times a day. We all have experience with this category. A major distributor of snacks came to us and said, our sales are declining. And we'd like to understand why that is. We believe that our assortment in the machines is not quite right, but we don't know how to fix it. So we designed a choice modeling study, and we fielded this study across a several-month period, across many geographic regions. The client suspected, and we did as well, that where the machine was actually situated really did impact what was selected in the machine. So we considered scenarios in the online survey that were in schools, in office buildings, in places where there might be blue-collar versus white-collar workers, and suspecting that differences would really emerge from that. So using the decision simulator, this client company took all the models, of course, that were hidden behind the simulator and produced several planograms, potential planograms based on region, based on where the machine's located, and we even include some seasonality in there. The client was thrilled. They were able to take these suggested planograms and open a very honest dialogue with their operators. They had somewhat limited control over them, but they were able to go to the operators and recommend new planograms to maximize sales. Our next case story is the communications optimization, and this one comes from the healthcare industry. And as we know, in the U.S., we've had a very well, it's a changing environment. There's a lot of confusion among consumers, and a healthcare insurance or a health insurance provider wanted to know, how do we communicate with our customers specifically about the Affordable Care Act? So this insurance company wanted to explore different positioning, messaging elements to determine which ones would be the most compelling to their consumers. So after a MaxDiff exercise to choose positionings and methods that would most interest consumers in purchasing some health insurance, the participants rated each message for believability, relevance, and fit with the brand. So a comprehensive preference model was developed using the MaxDiff exercise selections along with the subsequent ratings, and the model clearly identified the strongest positionings, strongest supporting messages. So as a result, these positionings and messages that were most compelling to consumers became building blocks for new ad campaigns. And this led to a dramatic improvement in the client's advertising and in health insurance sales volumes. The next case study switches to the area of high technology. And in this case, we used choice modeling as a springboard to sales forecasting. So a multinational manufacturer wanted to introduce some new technologies into U.S. and European markets over the next 10 years. Of course, the rewards for creating these new technologies can be very huge. However, the investments, manufacture, marketing of the new technologies are equally huge. Attempting to forecast future market demand for new technologies can be challenging. The market environment can change rapidly, and infrastructure for some tech is just not in place. So we worked closely with our client, and our choice modeling techniques allowed us to create sets of future scenarios. So we varied infrastructure issues such as number and density of these items, and these were all addressed in the models. So an online choice task asked consumers to select new products in the future given different environmental infrastructure structure factors. Products differed by size, by power, and cost, and the respondents selected their preferred product. This was a durable good, so they were allowed to select one product on each screen. We calibrated the choice model to actual sales data for the technologies that are currently available on the market. And then we projected or forecasted the number of products of the new technology based on this calibrated data. And the client, of course, was able to use these results and decided, based on the results, to limit the technologies to particular countries, geographies. And our final case story comes from the world of food and beverage, and this is for a market segmentation. So a major European food company bought a brand portfolio in a category in which the company currently did not offer any products. After conducting qualitative ethnographic research, we discovered that the market could be segmented based on how consumers made choices in this category. So we used an online survey, incorporated a max-diff exercise to identify key differences from consumer to consumer. And so during the task, respondents viewed several sets of attitudinal, lifestyle, behavioral statements, and they selected the statement that most described them and the statement that least described them. So these scores, the max-diff scores, along with category usage and demographics, were input into a segmentation analysis. And we identified 5 very different market segments. So the newly acquired brand in the new category could target 2 of these with just some minor repositioning, but we discovered a line extension would be required to boost the company's overall market share. So this line extension was developed and is currently helping the client build its share in the new category.
Thank you, Beth, and thanks so much for attending today's webinar on choice modeling. Choice modeling can be applied in summary to virtually any type of marketing problem or marketing opportunity that needs resolution or optimization. There are many, many different types of choice models depending on the situation and what your goals are and what you're trying to achieve. And as I mentioned during the presentation, it's really, really important to include good, high quality, qualitative research in the planning stages of choice models so that you really know that you're measuring things properly and using the right language and the right terms and the right variables and the right levels. We do have several questions that have come in while we've been presenting. So Beth, would you like to take the first question?
I would love to, Jerry. So our first question is, what are the advantages of adaptive conjoint methods over some of the methods that you've discussed today? So great question. Adaptive conjoint, for those who might not know, is a way of winnowing down lots of attributes and levels that could be in a choice exercise down to the ones that are most important or critical for a respondent or a consumer making a purchase decision. So typically in a survey, there are different software platforms that can do this. We program our own version here at Decision Analyst. Other companies have different versions, but you show different attributes, different levels, and have respondents rate either importance or indicate which ones would never enter their minds to use as decision making, and through that process you winnow down the attributes and winnow down the levels so that when you finally reach the choice task, you do get very specific choices that matter to the respondent. So it's an intuitively appealing idea. For the respondent, it does take extra time because you do have to spend more time up front answering particular questions that are not very choice-like, by the way. They're usually rating scales. There's a little bit of choice in there. It can, in some instances, especially when you have many, many, many features and levels in your choice design, it can help really narrow down and narrow the focus of the study. In our experience, though, it's usually better to apply a different method, either winnow these attributes on your own or consider the context of the particular situation. So although we're not particularly big fans of adaptive conjoint here, we have used it, and it can provide some good learnings.
One additional comment on adaptive choice. there are some risks associated with it as well. One of the powers of choice modeling is that we're measuring things implicitly because people don't always know what's most important. And so by using the explicit method of identifying what's important up front, we might actually be creating errors that we're then pulling over into the choice modeling. And that's one of the reasons that we argue so strongly for doing really good, comprehensive, qualitative research up front so that we can design a very concise and precise choice model and eliminate the risk that you incur in adaptive conjoint. So the second question.
Let's see, we have what are Bayesian models and how are they related to choice models? Well, that's a very good question. Often our clients have heard of the term hierarchical Bayes. They're not quite sure what it is. It could be, could be anything. Specifically, that refers to a type of model estimation. What this gives us is individual respondent level utilities. Remember that earlier we talked about utilities being measures of preference. So we get preferences on the respondent level. This is very powerful because then we can aggregate across different sets of respondents however we would like. So we don't have to keep estimating models every time we want to look at, say, male respondents or female respondents, or those who were very likely to shop at a particular retailer. So we use mostly Bayesian modeling in our choice models. There are some exceptions. There are other types of estimations out there, and occasionally we'll use what's called a latent class modeling, where this attempts to find different classes or segments of respondents within your data set. So it's not an individual level modeling technique, but rather more of a group level modeling technique. That technique can be helpful when you have smaller base sizes in your sample.
The third question that's come in is, can choice models be used for forecasting the sales of new products? And the answer to that is yes, it can. In fact, it's quite a powerful technique for forecasting. Some of the keys to making it work are including all of the important brands in a product category within the choice modeling exercises or experiments, so that we're not leaving out any important products. And then the other aspects that are important are calibrating the model. We talked about that earlier, and the importance of calibration. And then what am I leaving out, Beth? We want always remember and as a part of that calibration, we are adapting the models or adjusting the models based on estimated awareness levels. We're certainly going to calibrate to existing market share data. We also would calibrate those models to expected distribution levels. So with those adjustments, the volumetric choice models that Beth discussed are really great ways to forecast sales of new products.
Great. So we have a final question, which is, do choice models overstate importance of variables because scenarios or the survey contain perfect information? That's a great question, and in fact the short answer is yes, simply because in a survey situation we've been in a sense advertising to our respondents about all the great features of this product or products and the category and the brands, information that a typical consumer might not have access to, would never think about looking for, etc. We know this as survey researchers. We know that all of our estimates can have overstatement or overenthusiasm associated with them. There are various ways that we can rein them back down, rein them in. One of the ways is, of course, the calibration, which Jerry discussed earlier. We can also use, especially if there's a concept test involved prior to the choice task, use that concept data to adjust for the overenthusiasm that we might see in the choice. So in a concept test, we'll show perhaps the new product so the respondent can be familiar with that. During the choice task, they might tend to select that new product more often simply because they had just seen it. But we can actually back off and back that estimate down into something that's more reasonable and more accurate using the data that's in the survey and then outside the survey in terms of sales data.
Great. If you have any additional questions, please go ahead and email those to us, and we will, our time is up, but we will follow up and answer any questions that come in by email. Thank you very much. Beth and I are going to turn it back over to Christy now.
Well, thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, and our next Insider Series webinar will be Wednesday, September 14th, and the topic will be market segmentation and will be presented by Beth. We hope you enjoyed today's session, and are looking forward to seeing you for next month's webinar, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.